Shalom. Back with another block of instructions for these idiots who try to take one verse out of scripture or two verses and pluck them here and there to turn their back on our glorious heavenly creator, Yahuwah, and our wonderful, most esteemed Messiah, Yahushua. Um, One of the arguments that has come up, and I wish I had had this information 2 years ago, when it came up to me because I didn't have the full information. I only had a portion of it. um, and Abba revealed it to me about 6 months later. Day late and a dollar short, but his timing, his will. He knows all things and why things happen, how they happen. Um, but I want to give you these instructions and point out a few things to you, both from the book of Genesis as well as from the book of Jubilees, which I truly believe is kadosh. Uh, it has never been like Enoch. It has never been removed from the Ethiopic canon. It remains there. This that I've been using is translated from R.H. Charles from the Ethiopic. So it's probably as close as we're going to get to something valid, short of, the Vatican releasing things, which, well, in Abba's timing. So, what are we talking about when I say this? And I'm showing you the book that I use. I got this copy from Global Gray eBooks. They have a plethora of books available for a very, very, very reasonable price. So if it's something that you want, I'll try and post the PDF in the description when I get all this said and done. We'll see how that plays out. But moving onward, I'm just going to reduce that. The hardening of hearts. One of the arguments that was presented to me by someone I love dearly was over here in Genesis. In Exodus 10 verse 1, somebody pointed out to him, and Yahuwah said to Moshe, "Go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his servants, so that I show these signs of mine before him." And he said, where is our free will if Yahuwah can harden his heart? And I didn't have the whole story. My first thought and my instinct was because Yahuwah loves those who love him, and he loves the tribe of Yashrael, tribes of Yashrael, and those children. And so, of course, he did, but that was wholly insufficient in the discussion. And going through, if you know I like my e-sword, this is going to be a much more organic discussion, by the way. Going through the book of the e-sword, I did a search for the word hardened, just because I knew that that was a word that was going to bring me in the right direction to show me what I was looking for. So check this out. Before Yahuwah hardened his heart, Pharaoh's heart, what we have up here in the verses preceding in Exodus 8:15, 8:32, 9:7, and 9:34, when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his own heart and did not listen to them as Yahuwah had said he would do. 8:32, but Pharaoh hardened his own heart at this time too, and did not let the people go. Exodus 9:7, when Pharaoh sent, and see, not even one of the livestock of Yashrael was dead, but the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people go. And Pharaoh saw that the rain and the hail and the thunder had ceased, yet he sinned again, and he hardened his heart, he and his servants. So Yahuwah didn't do that to them. They chose to do these things amongst their own. So why all of a sudden down here does it say that he has hardened that Yahuwah has hardened his heart? And there are other references to this. Yahuwah hardened the hearts, or hardened the spirit, or hardened the neck, or that people hardened their own necks. We know those stiff-necked ones. Some of you may be, because you aren't going to hear this word, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. I'm sharing scripture. I'm pulling things together from precedents, from experience. I am giving you a block of information that I hope you can use in your own situations as they arise, if they arise in your world. Uh, Hopefully, a lot of you don't have to deal with this type of a situation, because it frankly sucks. But it is what it is. So here we have a principle, right? One of the things that people use is Pharaoh hardened, hardened Pharaoh's heart. So where's free will? We've shown that Pharaoh did it himself. So we're going to walk away from that, and we are going to go pull this back up so I can show you what I did and how I did it. If I get to share this PDF, having read through here a number of times, I knew the best way to find the information in the Book of Jubilees, and that was by using the name Mistema. In order to do a search on a PDF, all you have to do is look for the icon with the magnifying glass, and it'll pop this window open. Alternately, you can use Control F, and it will open up this window. And you can search for whatever you need to search. To isolate this was how I did it. Mistema, as we'll find out as we go through my pullouts, and I have the footnotes, etc., over here. When I pulled up Mistema, you see all these highlights in this bar. These highlights are where that word comes up in the Book of Jubilees, and it is an isolated word. It is only found, to the best of my knowledge so far, the only place I've seen it is in the Book of Jubilees. I will say again, I believe Enoch and Jubilees should be part of your readings and should be part of the original books. They expand on matters in the book of Genesis, and no lies detected. So you pray about it. Again, still part of the Ethiopic canon. None of the religions forced them to remove it, and they withheld onto. And I find the information to be outstanding and set apart. So this is where everything in this document that I'm going to go over comes from. And I just copied and pasted, so you're going to see the red lines and the green lines and the blue lines, because you're seeing what I copied and pasted. But it's easier than scrolling through a couple hundred pages for your sake. All right, so we have a basic principle. Why did I use Mistema? You're familiar with, in the book of Daniel, that when Gabriel, hit that mouse pad, that Gabriel withstood the prince of Persia for 21 days on his way to go see Daniel to deliver a message for Yahuwah. And we all know that story. We don't think anything about it. It is what it is. The prince of Mistema is a principality. What you have here, with, as we go through the footnotes that give information about Mistema, is you'll find something very similar. Yeah, basically it just means a Satan. So on page 17 in the prologue, he was talking about the orders of the angels as given in the book of Enoch, and he mentioned that over against the angelic orders there stands a well-organized demonic kingdom presided over by the prince of the Mastema. And footnote 13 is this is the right form of the expression, not Prince Mastema. Mastema in derivation means Satan. And among the satanic beings that appear in the book of Belair, I have not read the book of Belair. I can't speak on that yet. When you get down to page 78, you will find a cross-reference to Genesis chapter 9, verse 28, so that you can kind of see that in this book they do just this. They give you the cross-references to Genesis where they're applicable, so that you can be mollified and find it in your canon and in your King James Version that makes you all cozy. And in the third week of this Jubilee, the unclean demons began to lead astray the children of the sons of Noah, and to make to err and destroy them. And the sons of Noah came to Noah their father, and they told him concerning the demons which were leading astray and blinding and slaying his sons' sons. So footnote 2, the spirits which issued from the children of the angels and the daughters of men. If you watched my last video or you're familiar with Enoch, you understand that the demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, the entities that were formed by the fallen angels coming and forsaking their kingdom, their first estate, and causing all kinds of chaos. You can move on down to page 79, and I'm still in chapter 10 to verse 8, and it says, And the chiefs of the spirits, Mastema, came and said, Adonai, Creator, let some of them remain before me, and let them hearken to my voice, and do all that I shall say unto them. For if some of them are not left to me, I shall not be able to execute the power of my will on the sons of men. And these are for corruption and leading astray before my judgment. For great is the wickedness of the sons of men. And he said, Let the 10th part of them remain before him, and let 9 parts descend into the place of condemnation. All right. So, what's going on here? We see similar language in the book of creation and in the book of Adam and Eve, where whichever Satan this is, if it's the chief of the spirits, whichever name from Enoch this really is, I'm not even going to get into that because we're told not to utter their names, but we are given those evil names. I'm not calling on them, I'm teaching them. Instructing, big difference. Instructing is just putting out a block of information. Teaching means I know something that nobody else has access to. I'm not doing that. This information is available to everybody to put together on their own. So I'm putting it together for you to think about, pray about, do with what you will, and have the information when some idiot comes and says, but Abba hardened Pharaoh's heart, and we don't really have free will, so I'm not going to worship him. I'm going to go back and serve the old gods. You know, the creations, the exact ones that are being talked about here. But, you know, what do we know? We just listen to the Rushah Kodashah. We don't care what the world and Helly-Weird says. Get back on track. The word apparently, mestim, part of satam, to be adverse, inimical. The Hebrew noun mastema, animosity. Excuse me, Texas allergy season. As a proper name, it is practically confined to the Jubilees literature, which I mentioned earlier. The name Mistema is confined largely to the book of Jubilees. The evil spirits under the guidance of Mistema tempt, accuse, and destroy men. Only 1/10 are permitted to act freely against mankind till the day of judgment. But in First Enoch, all the demons are allowed to do this. There's a difference here in... I need water. In how these people are accepting this and understanding this and seeing this. Remember, there was the rebellion, and then there was the fall. Those are two different events of angels leaving their first estate. Of the fallen ones, the 200, they've been put in Tartarus. This isn't what they're talking about. This 10%, this 10th part of them that remain before him, I could be wrong. I think that 10th part is not from the ones that the 200 that fell. I think this 10th part is actually from the fallen ones in the rebellion. I could be wrong, but even if it's just the 10% of the fallen ones as opposed to the rebellious ones, that's still 20 angels, evil angels, fallen angels walking around doing these things. And that very well could be the case because, you know what? I wonder if I could pull that up real quick. Yeah, I might. I think I'm gonna. Let me see if I can find it without a whole bunch of trouble. I put together a table. See, I told you this was going to be a little bit more, there we go, organic. Let's close that up. Oh, I was already scrolled in. So among the old gods, I really despise that. You have the Greek, the Roman, and the Norse primarily. That's not including the Hindu gods and whatnot. That's a whole separate ball of wax. But what we do have is, look at the similarities in the Greek and the Roman. They even have the same name. There's about 20 of the main ones who committed iniquity with the humans and the animals and the beasts and the fish and etc., etc. They pretty much even have the same names throughout there. I have another one, I thought. Yep, there it is. And people know Zeus, Jupiter, Odin. I guess they don't really know the difference between Odin and Thor. Thor would actually be more of a Ares and Mars character, I guess. But there's a very limited number of these primary fallen ones. It could easily be, they could be 20 of the original 200 fallen angels. It would not be too surprising, especially with the overlap and the similarities and their stories being so much the same. Because, well, the only thing they want is to be loved and have people not worship our Creator, but His created things. Blasphemy beyond anything I can imagine, and that anybody could be so foolish that just boggles my mind. But anyway, so we have here the head chief spirit of these fallen ones from whichever category. Enoch, we know from before, he ascribes all sin to Azazel in Scripture. Could it be? I don't know. I don't worry too much about all that. Like I said, we're not supposed to call on their names. They simply need to be mentioned in terms of teaching at times, and it was an easy way to get me where I wanted in the Book of Jubilees. But there are fallen angels walking around on the earth. And there you go. And one of us he commanded that we should teach Noah all their medicines, for he knew that they would not walk in uprightness, nor strive in righteousness, because being righteous is work, and it means losing people you love because. And we did according to all his words. All the malignant evil ones we bound in the place of condemnation, but 1/10 part of them we left, that they might be subject before Satan on the earth. So here we're talking about, yeah, here we're talking, that's a whole nother subject. Stay on track, yes, dear. The angel Raphael is referred to as is shown by the Hebrew book of Noah. For Raphael is in connection, and that's also in the book of Tobit, which is not only in the Ethiopic canon, but it is still part of the Catholic canon for those of you who want a Catholic bash. Thus Satan and Mastema are identical. And that's it. They're at the bottom line, that it's the same evil, selfish, disobedient thing. It is. But I'm going through that because at the end of all this, you're going to see how that circles back and all ties in with the event of Pharaoh's neck being stiffened. Even though there's 4 verses before that says he did it to himself. And they made for themselves molten images, and they worshipped each the idol, the molten image which they had made for themselves, and they began to make graven images and unclean simulacra. I didn't even look it up, it didn't matter enough. And malignant spirits assisted and seduced them into committing transgression and uncleanness. And the prince Mastema exerted himself to do all this, and he set forth other spirits, and those which put under his hand, to do all manner of wrong and sin, and all manner of transgression, to corrupt and destroy, and to shed blood upon the earth. For this reason he called them Serug, for everyone turned to do all manner of sin and transgression. This comes from pages 85 and 86 in chapter 11 of the Book of Jubilees. And the prince Mastema sent ravens and birds to devour the seed which was sown in the land, in order to destroy the land and rob the children of men of their labors. Before they could plow in the seed, the ravens picked it from the surface of the ground. This was an interesting portion of the book where it talks about Noah and how he came into relationship with Yahuwah. Jump on up to page 117, chapter 16. Let's look at this real quick because there was no footnote. Here they're saying it was the prince of the Satans that sent the evil things to do the evil things to cause trouble for humans and those who either served no one or who served the Father. Chapter 16, and it came to pass in the 7th week, lots of calendar stuff in the book of Jubilees. You can tell by the name. I'm not getting into all that. In the first year thereof, in the first month, in this Jubilee, on the 12th of this month, so the 12th of the first month of the year, the first month is always going to be Abib. It's always going to be in the springtime. It's always going to align with the barley being ripening, planting season. The sun, the stars are all going to work toward the seasons. There were voices in heaven regarding Abraham that he was faithful in all that Yahuwah told him, and that he loved Yahuwah, and that in every affliction he was faithful. And no matter how bad it got, he stayed focused on Yahuwah. Isn't that beautiful? Who is he the Elohim of, the God of? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yahushua is the high priest in the order of Melchizedek. In Genesis, we find out that Melchizedek blessed Abraham. He did a lot more. There's a lot more to that. But this time frame is so important to us as believers in Yahushua. And the Prince Mastema came and said before Yahuwah, Behold, Abraham loves Isaac his son, and he delights in him above all things else. Bid him offer him as a burnt offering on the altar, and thou wilt see if he will do this command, and thou wilt know if he is faithful in everything wherein thou dost try him. Book of Jasher gives this in a little bit different light. I like Jasher, but a dear sister has pointed out that there is more question and doubt about the book of Jasher. So I'm focusing on Jubilees that is not questioned as much for its authenticity, especially going back to it's in the Ethiopic canon. So here we have the Prince Mastema went to Yahuwah and said, this man loves his child. So what's going to happen if I ask him, if you ask him, I think Job, what did Job lose? Okay, well, here's Isaac. And according to this book, Isaac was 22 when this happened. In Jasher, he was probably about 33. So, discrepancies. Either way, he was not the little child that we're led to believe in Sunday school. You'll see that, you see if he does this command. And here you see that the enemy went to Yahuwah and said, try this one. And Yahuwah allowed it to happen. Although Genesis would lead you to believe that Abba decided to do it that way, there was a reason behind the reason. And we see these same principalities tempting or trying to tempt Yahushua. We see these same principalities behind other things in Ezekiel and in other places, and it's left flat in the book of Genesis that the enemy had a play in this too. And this is why I think these other books are so important. So on page 119 of my version of my PDF of the book of Jubilees in chapter 18, and he built an altar, and he placed the wood on the altar, and bound Isaac his son, and placed him on the wood which was upon the altar, and stretched forth his hand to take the knife to slay Isaac his son. And I want you to understand, Isaac wasn't fighting this. Isaac was perfectly compliant this whole time because Isaac also loved Yahuwah. And I stood before him and before the prince of the Mastema, so prince of the Mastema, which is a group, and Yahuwah said, bid him not lay his hand on the lad, nor to do anything to him, for I have shown that he fears Yahuwah. And I called to him from heaven, and I said to him, Abraham, Abraham, and he was terrified. And he said, behold, here am I. And I said, lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything to him, for now I've shown that you fear me. Respect. All right, there's fear and there's respect. I hope you know the difference. Respect is being obedient above all things else. I don't like doing these videos. I respect Abba when he tells me to do these videos. And has not withheld thy son, thy firstborn son from me. And the prince of the Mastema was put to shame. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a single ram was caught by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called that place, the Lord hath seen, so that it is said in the mount, the Lord hath seen, or Mount Zion. And I'm sorry I used that word instead of switching it out, but I did. I don't like that word. Here what we find is up here, the prince of the Mastema, footnote 5. And here and also in other places, Mastema is the name given to the whole class of evil spirits or Satans elsewhere of the prince of these himself. Page 125, chapter 19. And he called Jacob before the eyes of Rebekah his mother, and kissed him, and blessed him, and said, Jacob, my beloved son, whom my soul loveth, may Yahuwah baruch you from above the firmament, and may he give thee all the blessings wherewith he blessed Adam and Enoch and Noah and Shem, and all the things of which he told me, and all the things which he promised to give me. May he cause to cleave to thee and to thy seed forever, according to the days of the Shamayim above the earth. And the spirits of Mastema shall not rule over thee, or over thy seed, or turn thee from Yahuwah, who is thy Elohim, from henceforth forever. This was a blessing from Abraham to Jacob. But it brings up the evil ones, that the Satans should not rule over them. Doesn't mean that those people won't be deceived at points in their life when they think they're smart and they're still idiots. Page 236, chapter 48. And thou knowest what he spake unto thee on Mount Sinai, and what the prince Mastema. Let's back up real quick up here, because Mount Zion, we know Mount Zion is important. And where Abraham took Isaac was the same place that our esteemed Redeemer, Yahushua, was obedient unto death. And he called Jacob before I did that. There's places that just link up. And thou knowest what he spake unto thee on Mount Zion, and what Prince Mastema desired to do with thee when you were returning into Egypt, on the way when you met him at the lodging place. And this is Moshe, I think. Yeah. Way down in the end of the book. Did he not with all his power seek to slay thee and deliver the Egyptians out of thy hand, when he saw that you were sent to execute judgment and vengeance on the Egyptians. And I delivered you out of his hand, and you did perform the signs and wonders which you were sent to perform in Egypt against Pharaoh, and against all his house, and against his servants and his people. What do we have here where the enemy is coming against Moshe? Footnote 3, notice here the substitution of satanic agency, where the original text of Scripture ascribes the action directly to Yahuwah. Another, in Exodus 24, another instance in our book is the same tendency can be illustrated from First Chronicles compared with 2 Samuel. I'm not doing all those cross-references for you. I'm heading toward a final point. Footnote 4, the explanation of the incident described in Exodus seems to be peculiar to our author, the real explanation being that Moshe had failed to circumcise his son. That comes from the Targum. I don't deal with the Targum. It gets into Jewish folklore too much. And I don't care about what the Jews think, honestly. I'm a follower of Yahushua, and he constantly chastised the Jews and the Pharisees. When we get moving into talking about the Exodus, something I'm finding common among people is they think that the Jews snuck out of Israel in the middle of the night. And it's very plain to read in the book of Exodus that, there were over 1 million of them plus their cattle. And you're not sneaking 1 million people and crying babies and cattle and camels and fowl and, geese. They don't go quiet. You're not sneaking out. They walked out in broad daylight. They were sent out in broad daylight. They were supposed to return. They were going to go, and it's plain to read in Exodus if you actually take the time to read it instead of just going from a movie from nearly 100 years ago. When you read that, you see that to get out of their situation, Moshe said, we want to go out 3 days walk from here and perform our sacrifices. But out of respect to you, because you worship bulls and cattle, and we don't want to insult you by doing it right here in the middle of you, let us go 3 days out, perform our sacrifices with the cows, and come back. And that way we're not doing this in disrespect in your face. So you figure a 6-day turnaround, 7-day turnaround at most. So they walked out during the day with the full moon in the middle of the month to give them longer travel time and setup time. And they go out there 3 days and then they just keep going. Right? They just keep going. Well, remember, we had looked in Exodus, wrong one, that before, shoot, I closed it out. Before, well, let's just remember that before the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, he had hardened it himself. So why did he let them go? Why did he finally decide to let them go and then 6 days later decide to go back after them when they didn't return? He had already hardened his own heart because he had hatred in his heart. So now let's find out what really went on. Page 237 and 238, chapter 48, starting in verse 8 in the book of Jubilees. And Yahuwah did everything for Israel's sake, which was what I knew when I was confronted with this argument. And I'm giving you more information so that if you are confronted with this argument, you have better weapons, understanding, defenses, and information than what I had. But Yahuwah's will. And Yahuwah did everything for Israel's sake, and according to his covenant, which he had ordained with Abraham, that he would take vengeance on them as they had brought them by force into bondage. Yes, Egypt was originally the salvation of the children of Abraham because of Joseph having been sent there and that whole precept. But over time, they became enslaved, kind of like taxation without representation. And the prince Mastema stood up against thee, and sought to cast thee into the hands of Pharaoh, and he helped the Egyptian sorcerers, and they stood up and wrought before thee. And evils indeed we permitted them to work, but the remedies we did not allow to be wrought by their hands. And Yahuwah smote them with malignant ulcers, and they were not able to stand, for we destroyed them, so they could not perform a single sign. This we is the host of the Shamayim. You see this language strongly in Genesis, although most people don't catch it. It's a little on the deep side. We're going to not go into that. Stay focused. And withstanding all these signs and wonders, the prince of the Mastema was not put to shame, because he took courage and cried to the Egyptians to pursue after thee with all the powers of the Egyptians, with their chariots and with their horses, and with all the hosts of the people of Egypt. And I stood between the Egyptians and Israel, and we delivered Israel out of his hand and out of the hand of his people, and Yahuwah brought them through the midst of the sea as if it were dry land. We know that part. And on the 14th and the 15th day and the 16th day and on the 17th day and on the 18th day, the prince of the Mastema was bound and imprisoned behind the children of Yashrael, that he might not accuse them. So, from the 14th day of the first month, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, that's 5 days. Yahuwah bound Mastema. He bound Satan away from Pharaoh, so the enemy could not encourage the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. And on the 19th day, we let them loose, that they might help the Egyptians and pursue the children of Yashrael. So on the 6th day, Yahuwah's Kadosh set apart angels, warriors, who were sent to hold back, hear that, who were sent to hold back those evil spirits, their fallen brothers. They let them loose. And they did their thing. And they hardened Pharaoh's heart, not Yahuwah. And he hardened their hearts and made them stubborn, and the device was devised by Yahuwah our Elohim, that he might smite the Egyptians and cast them into the sea. And on the 14th we bound him, that he might not accuse the children of Yashrael on that day, when they asked the Egyptians for vessels and garments, and vessels of silver, and vessels of gold, and vessels of bronze, in order to despoil the Egyptians in return for the bondage in which they had forced them to serve. And you see this also in the book of Genesis, when the Egyptians were, when the Israelites were leaving Egypt after the plagues, the people of Egypt were like, go here, take all our stuff. You might need it on your trip. Well, they were only supposed to be gone for 6 days. So you got to think in your mind, these people didn't really think they were going to come back. But whether they did or not, they were just throwing them gold and silver and fabric and everything under the sun just to get them out the gates, because the plagues were really bad. But the plagues got sent because Pharaoh's heart was already hardened, because they were serving the old gods, the ones that looked like half man, half dog, half frog, half man, half crocodile, half man, half fly, half man. Pretty much all the plagues were not against the creatures or the people. Yahuwah was actually going after their old gods. And that's what they were serving. He was destroying the old gods. Yeah, the children of the fallen ones. So, in Exodus, where it reads, and Yahuwah hardened Pharaoh's heart, that is a misdirect. Because what we learn here, and it's also in the book of Jasher, is that Yahuwah's Kadosh messengers, the same ones who withstood the Prince of Persia for 21 days and then managed to go deliver the message. Well, Michael came and filled in for Gabriel while Gabriel got off to Daniel and delivered his message and answer to his prayer. And then he got back to his brother Michael. He said, I got to get back to the fight, but here, let me do this. And Yahuwah spoke through Gabriel. And then Gabriel went back, and he and Michael did however they did that fight. There's so much to all of it. But let this help you if you have to deal with that argument. Now you'll have the information to withstand the enemy and not simply say Yahuwah was there to help the Israelites, that he withheld Satan from allowing it to happen. So what we learn is that Yahuwah did not harden Pharaoh's heart. He withheld the evil from him to do what he already wanted to do, not dissimilar to what we know of Gabriel being withstood by the Prince of Persia for 21 days on his way to go see Daniel. So you see, I did this paper a day or two ago, and there's a theme. There's a theme. And in chapter 49, page 239, remember the commandment which Yahuwah commanded thee concerning the Passover, that thou shouldst celebrate it in its season on the 14th of the first month, that thou shouldst kill it before its evening, and that you should eat it by night, and on the 15th from the time of the setting sun. For on this night, the beginning of the festival and the beginning of the joy, you were eating the Passover in Egypt, when all the powers of Mastema had been let loose to slay all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. And again, here we see the change from Exodus 29, where it says that Yahuwah was the angel of death that smote all the firstborn. Here we're seeing that it is the powers of Mastema, the powers of Satan, that had gone ahead and slain the firstborn of the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh to the firstborn of the captive maidservant in the mill and to the cattle. Should be a familiar verse somewhere in the Gospels. The enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy in all times. In all times. I don't know if I can add anything to this. I think it's pretty self-explanatory as you go through it, and once it's all brought to light, I hope it is. I hope you see that Yahuwah did not harden Pharaoh's heart, and that even according to the book of Exodus, Pharaoh's heart was already hardened, and this explains why he let the Egyptians or the Israelites go, because Yahuwah withheld him from being hardened by the evil of the old gods. And can you tell I don't like that? I get kind of annoyed by that. Yeah, well, I do. It's so ludicrous. Worshipping the creations instead of the creator. It's mind-boggling. But there you have it. I hope this block of instruction is useful to you and helps you in your own walks and in the path that Yahuwah sends you on. May Yahuwah Baruch Atah. May you be enlightened. May you be strengthened. May you be encouraged. May you be strong before our Creator. And may you go forth walking in truth and righteousness and expectation of salvation